Hello, everybody. Welcome. We will probably wait another minute or so before we actually get started. We will be talking about PLG stuff, which I'll introduce in a bit, and we've got some fun guests here. You'll see there's two extra people. Well, actually one extra person, because normally it's just two people here. Today we have three. So let's see how we're doing. People are still trickling in. So we'll kind of get started here in a little bit. Lisa, where are you at today?
I am based out of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Got it. Ronnie, where about you?
I work remotely from Vancouver, Washington, but today also in the San Francisco Bay Area at home base. So we had an offsite this week.
That's cool. I didn't know you were in Vancouver. I'm in Bend, so that's like really close.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like Bend.
Yeah, Bend's a great place. Okay, I think we can probably get started. So welcome everybody to another of our Fullcast Fireside Chats. Today we're going to talk all about product-led growth. So you'll hear PLG drops, maybe some PQL, I don't know, some acronyms, some fun stuff. I think we're going to get really into the details on this, on how you would implement this. So we're not going to just scratch the surface today. You're going to be able to walk away with some real actionable items. I know nothing about PLG, so we brought on two amazing guests, Lisa Larson and Ronnie Duke. But before we get to that, I got to do my own spiel. I'm Tyler Simons, head of customer success at Fullcast, and we are a go-to-market planning and execution platform. So Lisa, why don't you give us a quick intro on what you're up to?
All right, gotta find that unmute button. So I am currently at Near. I've been here just shy of 2 months. Near provides a data intelligent platform that delivers actionable insights on consumer behavior at a global scale. Basically, they take a lot of the data from your cell phone, they aggregate it, and they sell that data anonymously. My career has been circled around sales operations, revenue operations. I've been in the space for about 10 years, and I'm currently director of global revenue operations at Near.
Wonderful. Ronnie?
Yeah, Ronnie Duke, director of marketing operations at a company called ProductBoard. ProductBoard helps product teams take customer-driven insights and turn them into product roadmaps. And I've been here for just over a year, and I've been in the operations marketing space for probably 10 to 15 years, and all just various aspects of marketing and technology. I'm just really excited to talk to you guys today about what we're doing.
So, as everybody knows, I don't like to beat around the bush, so we're going to get right into it. And we're going to put Lisa on the hot seat to start. So, where do we start, right? Like if I'm thinking about, the company's made this strategic decision, we're going to go PLG all the way. We're going to go for it. Now, operations is going to be like, well, we got to get leads to the right people. We got to come up with processes. We got to figure out all these systems and get things together. Where do you start to think about that to accommodate this PLG strategy?
So I think first and foremost is figuring out who that you're going to partner with in setting up PLG. There's people from sales and marketing and the product team, engineering, that all needs to be involved to get a successful PLG up and running. As you mentioned, it's thinking of the process end to end without boiling the ocean, at least to start, and how you're going to get those PLG or PQLs, product qualified leads, into the hands of sales. So there's thinking about, how are they going to come inbound to you? What information are you going to ask about the customer and their use case to uncover, if they are a good fit to go down the PLG path or to go to more sales-led path. So how are they going to come inbound to you? What questions are you going to ask them? Are you going to enrich the information that they give you with additional data so that you can score them and then figure out where they need to go within the organization? at the organizations that I've worked at that have PLG, there's always a bucket that goes maybe down a self-service path, and then there's a bucket that's maybe high quality, high value that you want sales to get involved in early to ensure the success of that customer. So making, all of those decisions and then figuring out how it all comes together.
What I think is interesting here, and you kind of called this out, which is like both engineering and product need to be involved. And that to me is very different than a non-PLG company. They might be involved in kind of leads coming in and stuff, but you don't really think about it that much. And I think that's kind of maybe that first bit of like, this is much larger than just revenue operations and marketing operations and sales ops or whatever. So certainly starting at that point, Ronnie, you've got the marketing ops lens. Do you see anything you would add differently from like processes and systems on that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, just like Lisa said, I can't stress enough the importance of PLG being a team sport, and making sure that it touches so many different things. Like, at Product Board, marketing is responsible for like the free trials. Like that's a marketing metric, that we're measured against. And so just really important to, from a data standpoint, we also have leads that come in from other sources. We have just the standard ebooks and webinars and conferences and things like that. And so like free trials, being one of our inbound sources is another data point. It's an entry point that we need to be able to track and be able to compare that, because people can do more than one thing. And so it's just really important to map out what those potential journeys are and think of all the different edge cases. Like, well, what if somebody does a free trial and then downloads an ebook, or the inverse, or how are you capturing that data? How are you stamping them and knowing which comes first, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to attribution for these. And as Lisa was saying, like getting product involved, like it's not product does something, then okay, we're gonna do free trials now, then ops go figure it out. There's all kinds of different things that we got to account for. What is supposed to happen when these leads come through? Do they go down to the self-serve path? What data tells us that? Like, what can we in operations use to route people and trigger different functionalities? Got to put everything out on the table and then determine how are these decisions going to get made, and like what is the expectation for these leads when they go through this journey.
Yeah, the scenario piece is, I think, super key. And a lot of people just skip that, probably, in the sense that like you would just say, well, it's a PQL if it signs up for a free trial. But to your point, like what happens when they do this or that in the platform? And I think that starts to inform a lot of the enrichment and the scoring that you need to do to prioritize one PQL over another. And then that kind of also brings into like, what sorts of product data do you need to have available to the system? Was there anything interesting? I just like, I'm always fascinated with like the data side of things, in particular, like product usage stuff. If you're sitting and thinking about like, what do you need to have in the system to define those? Is there like anything that like stands out to either of you? Maybe Lisa, and your history of like, we always typically need to see like these three things in the system to be able to kind of like know that it's a PQL and this is maybe high priority. And maybe it's different and it depends, right? You can give that cop-out answer, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, the PQL really depends on what form they filled out. Did they request to get access to the product immediately, to be dropped into a trial or to be dropped into a freemium model of the product? So I think, the form is the way of identifying that. But once they're in your database as a user, the information about them that's important, that kind of traverses any type of product that you have, is how many users have been invited to that instance. So not necessarily capturing, all their user information in the CRM, but at least having a high level detail in the CRM that says, this is how many users have been added, and some information about like their last usage. Did they come in and did they sign up? Great. But then after that, did they use the product? And then the details that you capture about the product, I think differs based on your product. In past life, working for a BI tool, we wanted to know, how many dashboards have they created? How many charts within there did they create? Did they create the big dashboards that are really powerful, or are they just kind of tinkering? And so, giving that level of insight of like, how deep has their usage gone, can predict in a way how that lead will ultimately convert into revenue. Did they go full blown, access it, and they're gung ho, or did they just sign up and it went nowhere?
Yeah. Ronnie, is this just like a CRM thing, or like a marketing automation and a CRM thing? Or are there like more things that you need to think about outside of that?
Oh, how much time do you got? There are so many things. Yeah, the thing that I would take a step back and think about is, what is your definition of a PQL to start with? And that's in the PLG space, like that's PQL has become a very fuzzy term. And I come from like a marketing background, so it's really not dissimilar to like an MQL process. If anybody is used to scoring based off of content behavior, like, oh, they downloaded 3 ebooks and they got 50 points, and that triggers like an MQL, to go over to sales. And there's some companies that treat that PQL process as like just immediately signing up for a free trial. I mean, that would be akin to somebody just entering your database for the first time on your marketing automation system. Would you decide to MQL that person on that first action? Or does it depend? Like, is it based off of the profile of the account or the user? Like sometimes, if they're an unknown like Gmail or something like that, maybe we want to let them marinate a little bit, in the product, and like show signs of what type of usage makes sense for them to be considered ready to have a conversation. But then also defining what that usage threshold should be. And sometimes that there's a little bit of science that you need to maybe collect some data and figure out what are users, doing in their free trial process. And there's tools out there. I came from a company called Heap, that does product analytics. And so, that can different tools out there can deliver that usage data to your CRM or, within the tool itself to help you investigate, where should that threshold be? Is it, invite, just a single user? Is it inviting 10 users? Is it in product board creating their first roadmap or creating their first feature? Is it 3 features? Like you could argue all day long, with what those should be. But I think there's also technology that's getting better around like introducing AI into this whole thing and figuring out where that threshold should be.
Yeah, I'm getting nervous. This is sounding complex. So what?
It's job security, Tyler.
Yeah. What, if I just make my PQL somebody that signs up to it for a trial, is this like, am I digging myself like my own grave right now? Or, is that like a decent place to start? I'm just one person. My company decided to do this. Like, could we start there and then start to look at like how things are working and iterate? Or is this something we just need to go through and really determine all the usage data, all the scenarios, everything out there? I'm curious to hear from both your perspectives. And Lisa, we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for a company that they had this process set up when I had joined, but it was very rudimentary. It was every person who was coming into the website essentially ended up as a trial. And over time that evolved. A self-service process was introduced. And there was, the bifurcation between these are high value, these are low value, these need a human touch and these don't. So it can totally evolve over time. You might have might have started out with just one product, and then over time you're expanding your product offering and dropping people into different product versions or whatever it may be. You might be doing A/B testing within the same product and features.
Yeah.
So it can certainly evolve.
Yeah.
It should
Right.
evolve. I'm doubtful that somebody thought of
It always
everything the first
evolves.
time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't,
I
Ronnie,
think
I don't
that-
know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, I always have something to add. No,
Perfect.
it's I think to me it's the expectation going into the process that we are going to cast a wide net to start, knowing that we're going to evolve. And I think when you talk about like digging your own grave, it's if you go into it and you start there and then you build this entire web of processes around that in all of your different like your CRM and your automation, your BI tools, everything like that, and you don't account for that iteration, then that's where people can get stuck. But yeah, I mean, you also don't want to set the threshold so high that, oh, Tyler, you have to do like 27 things in our product before you're going to PQL, and it's like, well, now that we don't know if that's how much you need, so
Yeah.
it is good to start wide and then narrow down, but like go into the process knowing that you're going to narrow that down, and what are you going to use to give you that intelligence to make those decisions.
It's almost like going back to our team of people and regularly meeting to discuss things that, well, this really actually isn't a PQL, and or at least we don't think it should be a PQL, and why is that? And taking that feedback and putting that back into the system to kind of iterate on it. I want to talk about something super tactical because Ronnie, I think you just kind of clued me in on this, which is like this like multiple trial downloads, and then all of a sudden you've got like 15 instances for, it's probably more like 150 instances for like IBM that exists because everyone's signing up with different things. And I've actually seen this in the CRM before where the company decides to just do like a one-to-one relationship. So then they've got 150 IBMs and you can't delete anything because then they lose access to the trial orgs. And I feel like that's a big mistake. So I was wondering if either of you have seen that, maybe ways to avoid that. And just, I think that's like one of the things is like setting this up, probably want to just think about if there was anything. I don't know, Lisa?
Sure. I mean, this is something that drives me crazy as someone who manages a lot of vendor accounts. Like I'll take DocuSign as an example. Great product. Their PLG process, I think, needs some improvement. There's always, as a DocuSign user, you can go and sign up for a free account. You can sign up for a free account under your business domain, and your business might already have a paid version. And when you do that, it doesn't tell you, hey, your company has a paid version. Maybe contact the administrator and get access through that one. It just drops you in. And then reps think that they're on the corporate version until I go to add them into the corporate version. It's like, this person already exists. Well, I don't see them in our version. So where are they? And how do we clean that up? So I think companies need to think about that. And, is their product something that multiple people within the organization will be signing up for? And how do you handle that? Do you allow for later someone's sign up to be then converted into an existing instance? Do you have to delete them completely? How does that work? And how that works will take a lot of product and engineering that's what's going to determine how your process is and how critical, like how many signups do you get for one company? Is it a problem to the point where you need to invest dollars and time from your engineering team to build that process? Or is it something that happens one-off, and when it does, you can handle it with your support team or something like that? So thinking about that process, I think, is key. With the DocuSign example, when that happens, we have to contact DocuSign. They fully delete the user who signed up, quote unquote, in error, and any documents that they've sent under the corporate domain they don't become a part of the corporate account, which
Right.
I think is a flaw in that process. So it's like, DocuSign, great product. I'm not trying to knock them, but it's, it's things like that to where it can really cue you into like, oh yeah, how do we do this as a company?
Yeah, super interesting. Ronnie, do you have anything to add to that? I know we're also like, we talked about this 30-minute thing. I don't know how this is going. There's a lot to go. So go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is like, it stresses the importance again of aligning product and operations up front to discuss these different scenarios before anything gets built, because you could have this assumption up front of like, oh, we'll just create a field in Salesforce of trial request date. Okay, well, what happens if that trial expires and they come back 6 months later and do another one? Are you updating that same field? Are you preserving it somehow? Is there business rules that dictate a unique user, like usually based off of the email address, can have more than one instance of your product? What are all the rules? Like, let's establish all these scenarios up front. And yeah, and like Lisa said, there's huge problems with you know that process of, I'm a user at a company, I know my company uses this product, so I'm just going to create my account, and I just create a free trial thinking I'm signing up to join my company's account. And like, how do you deal with that from an operations standpoint, and getting product involved, and like, is there things that need to be built in the product to tailor that experience and be smarter about account associations and things like that? Are there legitimate instances where maybe there's different business units within a very like an enterprise company that do warrant the ability to have different instances of your product? So there's all kinds of things to consider, and just getting on the same page, even at the top business level, like how we're going to handle like our customers in scenarios before you start building is the key thing.
This is something that's worth spending the time on. And Lisa, you had brought it up. You did while you were talking about the DocuSign example, right? And you're the customer, right? And that's an awful experience. And I think that that's where it is worth spending the time thinking through these scenarios and going, how are we going to treat all those? Because this is impacting not your internal organization, which everyone can always like kind of figure out and deal with, but how's it going to impact the customer? And that's the most important thing. And that goes back to, where are you going to focus your time and effort and making things super easy on the customer? What about metrics? Because everyone's going to probably want to like, well, you just track PQLs, but is there anything else that like really stands out in your experience that like was a really valuable metric to track on a regular basis, report on, etc.? Lisa, go.
So I think there's, of course, tracking like the first time that they PQL, the last time they PQL. It's interesting to know how many times someone PQLs over time. Ronnie alluded to that earlier. All of these, of course, any metric should, of course, be time bound and looking at them from the month, the quarter, the year, period over period.
So like a cohort.
Yeah. And then, just interesting to know, what is your total number of PQLs? How do you track those? And like, this is a business decision in a lot of ways, but it's like, when we are counting those PQLs, what do we care about? Was it the first PQL that person did, or that company did, or is it the last one? Or do we want to know the whole total of how many times that person or company came in through the PQL process? And then, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it was around like the product usage metrics, and can you get predictive in a way around the conversion of that freemium or trial model into a paid customer by the actions that they take. And then ultimately it's the conversion rates that you care about. How many of those PQLs actually converted into paid dollars over what time frame? You know, how long did it take them to convert? I think you can look at a lot of things related to them, but I'd say that those are the top ones that come to mind for me.
Great. Anything you'd add, Ronnie?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that it's important to decouple the raw activity that you're tracking from PQL is like kind of like a milestone, like an MQL, or there's a funnel that you're trying to track just from like a journey perspective in conversion rates and things like that. But then having that raw activity accessible, like say your PQL is based off of a certain logic, but then we have these scenarios where people can do multiple trials over the course of time. Trial activations is like a metric in and of itself that can exist, and then you can layer the two on top of each other when you're trying to do reporting and analysis and things like that. So having that raw data available allows you to have a more flexibility than stick to just like that rigid like first or last PQL, because that definition might change over time.
Yeah, makes sense. There was a question from an anonymous attendee that was related to your DocuSign process. And it was like, based on your experience, what would you do to fix the process? Or how would you start to make a plan to fix it?
Yeah. So, sorry.
I would just say 1 minute, and then I want to talk about some mistakes, because that's typically where we're going to make them, is in the mistake bucket.
Sure.
So
Okay.
anyway, go ahead.
I have a few minutes to go over too, if we need to. So the way that I would remedy that problem, I think there's a legal aspect to the way that DocuSign does or handles their process today, because you don't want somebody coming in and saying, hey, I work at ProductBoard, automatically drop me in when they don't actually work at ProductBoard. So there needs to be like that two-step verification of I've signed up now, with this email. Now let me go into my email and claim and verify that I actually work at that company. And then they can send you on a path. They could potentially notify the administrator that you just signed up, or they could present the administrator's information to you to say, hey, go and contact this person before they, enable the license, or to say, hey, you've joined a free trial, and if you need this to become a real thing, go talk to your administrator. But as of today, it's not very clear from the end user perspective that they dropped into a trial or a free version of it.
Great. All right, Ronnie, you're on the hot seat. Common mistakes. What is the biggest mistake you've ever made whenever it comes down? Just kidding. What are some common mistakes that you see with the this PQL process?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the there's this controversy in the PLG space around like this concept of, we don't want to ask the users too many questions up front or get too personal with their data collection. We just want to get them into the product by any means necessary. And what a lot of users do when, we kind of call them tire kickers, they get into the product and, they'll do like a single sign on with Google or something, and they'll use their Gmail or personal email or something like that, because they just want to like test out the product. The problem comes later on down the journey when, especially like if you're in a B2B SaaS company, your business model is around identifying accounts, like you're selling to accounts. And so you kind of have this disconnect between individuals as people and the account that's ultimately going to pay the bill, if they convert to a paying customer. And so from a data perspective and operations, that creates some challenges, because if you're not asking enough questions or the right questions in the sign up process and in the collection process, then you're going to get a personal email, a Gmail that comes in. It's going to go into, I'm Ronnie Duke at Gmail or whatever. And now my automation on my CRM, is going to say, well, I don't know who Ronnie works for. So I can try enrichment. I can try and Clearbit or something like that. That can be, touch and go,
Yeah.
Yeah. But then ultimately, if I decide, hey, I want to bring this into my company at ProductBoard, what does that process look like? Because obviously there's going to need to be a transition of getting me as a Gmail over to my product board email and tying it to the product board account. Product board has its firmographic metrics and everything like that that tell sales reps, what segment and they're in, and what territory and all that kind of stuff. But it's like it's bridging that gap between the users and the individual and the account. And product, I think, needs to be involved in that process. Like, is there maybe kind of a quarantine process where in your product that, okay, if you're not associated with a company, here's your test playground. When you're ready to move on, let's design a process that let's get more information. What account are you with? What territory you're in? Like, what are all the pertinent questions that operations needs to get you to the right person? Because that's what we're doing, is we're routing to sales that have different territories and segments that they own. And so it's just getting that data alignment from end to end in that journey.
Awesome. Lisa?
Two things are coming to mind for me. One is documentation. If you're like the Scrum mindset where you're like, you don't need to spend time documenting because you can look in the systems and figure out what has been built. I would say in a situation like this where there are a lot of systems at play, I can't go into the engineering systems and see what has been built there and the logic there. So there needs to be some documentation that outlines how the process is connected from all these disparate systems, because my employment at that company is not guaranteed and somebody will have to take it over. And I've had that experience where, coming in and being like, okay, what the heck was built here? It's really hard to tell. The people who built it are no longer here. Now we have to spend all this time digging into how it's all connected. So, I'm not saying you have to document every single thing, but the key players and how it all comes together certainly needs to be documented and shared, cross-departmentally. The other thing is the amount of data that you're creating in the CRM as a part of the PLG process. So I'm thinking about all of the users who could have been added into an instance of your product. Do those users need to all be created in your CRM? I've worked at companies that only created just the main person who signed up, and I've worked at companies who created everyone. For the companies that just created the one user, there's valuable information in there about other users that you could leverage. How many admins do they have? Maybe meeting somewhere in the middle and saying admins are important to create and push into the CRM, and maybe like super users or some kind of user profile. But to add everyone, depending on your product, it could mean implications for your storage in your CRM, right? Storage inside Marketo and inside Salesforce or HubSpot, it's not cheap. So you want to be mindful about the data that you're creating. So the users is one example, but it could be, anything. It's like you don't want to overload your CRM with data that's just ultimately not useful.
Wonderful. That's what a data warehouse or a data lake is for anyway.
Yeah.
Don't use your CRM as a data storage facility.
Yeah.
That's my one takeaway. I know we're a little bit over. I don't know if any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our group. Ronnie, anything? I know I told you I was going to put you on the spot at the end and no prep. So, if you don't have anything, it's fine.
No pressure. Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, like you don't want to let great become the enemy of good with this. Like we've identified, there's just a lot of moving parts. It's very easy to get into an analysis paralysis mode when trying to figure out like what are the right things to do, what are the right decisions to make. It's just you got to find the right balance. Like you want to start somewhere, but you want to go into it with the appropriate mindset of like we are doing this as a starting point, knowing that we're going to iterate on it. And as long as everybody's like in that mindset and there's like a cadence and there's a process to go in and iterate on that process and continue building, then I think you're going to be fine. Just continuing to build out. But I think it's, this mindset of like I said it and forget it just doesn't exist. In this world, technology is always changing, business rules are always changing. There's stuff that I've seen in systems that were based on segments that we maybe didn't service, 2 years ago that we do now. And so, there's all kinds of things that can change over time. And so building your systems in a modular way that allow you to go in and adjust those rules as needed is going to pay back in spades over time.
Great. Lisa?
Yeah. I'll just reiterate that it's a team sport, and you can't, build it all on your own, that you need the right people, the right departments involved in the conversations.
Yeah, that was kind of like, mine was like, get the team together. That includes product and engineering. Don't forget them.
And make sure they don't forget you too.
Yeah, that's true.
As an operations person.
Just build stuff out.
Yeah.
And then get the scenarios out, right? Get that down. Even if you don't address them, at least having them down and documented is key, because you're like, hey, this may be something we can address later. And then the third one, oh man, what was the third one? Think about the customer. Customer experience, that's key. So
yeah.
Anyway, Lisa, Ronnie, thank you so much for hopping on today. I know we knew this was going to be like an hour and a half, and we got it down to 37 minutes. So I think that was pretty good for us. I don't know. Anyway, thank you both for coming on. And until next time, thank you everybody for joining. And we'll see everyone at the next fireside chat / webinar.
Right.
See ya.
Thanks for having us, Tyler. That was a lot of fun.